We've all followed a recipe before. It's usually about getting a specific result. A decent cake, some good bread. But what if a recipe was also a sacred code? Today, we're stepping into the ancient temple in Jerusalem to explore these unbelievably detailed rules for baking holy bread, all decoded by the Talmud. Okay, let's get into it. Because as we're about to see, this is so much more than just flour and water. Every single step, from the kneading to the baking, holds this hidden layer of meaning that's pulled directly from the biblical text itself. It's basically a masterclass in close reading with bread. So here's our game plan. We're going to start by understanding what this bread was even for. Then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of the rules, decode the exact verse where these rules come from, uncover the surprisingly clever baking tech they used, and then, finally, we'll ask the big question. What's the whole point of all this? Okay, so first things first, let's set the scene. In the ancient temple, there were two main types of sacred bread offerings. You had the showbread, 12 loaves, placed on a golden table in the sanctuary every single week. And then you had the two loaves, which was a special offering from the brand new wheat harvest, brought once a year on the festival of Shavuot. Now, you'd think, hey, it's all holy bread, the recipe should be pretty much the same, right? Well, nope. And this is where it gets really fascinating. The Mishnah, which is like the foundational text of Jewish law, lays out these super precise and different instructions for each type, and that precision alone tells you something. For the sages, getting the details exactly right wasn't just a chore, it was a form of devotion. And here's the puzzle. Take a look. The rules are so specific. Both types of bread had to be kneaded individually, one loaf at a time. We're talking no big batches of dough here. But, and this is the key, when it came to baking, there was a huge difference. The 12 loaves of showbread were baked two at a time, in pairs. The two loaves, though, they were baked completely alone, one by one. And that, right there, is the central question that the Talmudic sages themselves were asking. If they're both holy offerings, why the difference? Why bake one type in pairs and the other solo? This is the exact mystery that we are about to solve. So where do you look for the answer? Well, the Gemara, which is the massive commentary on the Mishnah, doesn't pull out a baking manual. No, it becomes this team of scriptural detectives, and it performs what is basically a forensic analysis on one single verse from the book of Leviticus. This right here, this is our ground zero. Every single rule we just talked about is pulled from the specific wording of this verse. See, the sages believed that in a divine text, there are no extra words. Not a single letter is wasted. Everything is there for a reason, trying to teach us something. So, let's see how they build their case. It starts right here with this phrase, shall be in one cake. They read this hyper-literally. It means that the specific measure of flour belongs to one cake, and one cake only. So from that, they deduce that each of the 12 showbread loaves has to be kneaded by itself. One measure of flour, one loaf of dough. Simple. But wait, you're thinking, what about the two loaves for Shavuot? This verse is clearly talking about the showbread. Well, the sages notice the phrase, shall be. They argue that the verse could have just said, 2/10 in one cake. That extra verb, shall be, acts like a little signal, an inclusion, telling us to extend this rule of individual kneading to the two loaves as well. Okay, that takes care of the kneading. So what about the baking? For that, they look at the next part of the verse, and you shall set them. Now, them is plural, obviously, but they interpret that to mean the loaves have to be handled as a plural unit, in pairs. And boom, that's the source for baking the showbread 2 by 2. And this is where it gets really brilliant. The sages then argue that the word them all by itself, without the verb attached, also serves as a term of exclusion. It means this rule of baking in pairs applies only to them, the showbread mentioned right here in the verse, and not to any other sacred bread, like the two loaves. Now hold on a second. If you're following the logic here, you might be asking the exact same question the Gemara asks itself. Wait a minute. How can the same word, otam, meaning them, be used for both an inclusion, teaching us two together, and an exclusion, teaching us only the showbread is baked that way? That sounds like a flat-out contradiction. And the answer is just so clever, it really shows you the depth of this analysis. It's all in the Hebrew spelling. See, the phrase for and you shall set them is written visamta otam. The sages point out that a much shorter, more common way to say the same thing would be visamtam. The fact that the Torah uses the longer, less common phrasing is a signal that the word is doing double duty. It's teaching us both of those laws at the exact same time. Okay, so we've been deep in the weeds of some pretty intense legal reasoning. let's switch gears and get practical. How on earth did the temple bakers actually make sure these 12 loaves of showbread, baked in pairs, came out perfectly uniform and didn't, fall apart? Well, the Mishnah gives us the answer. They used molds. And not just one mold. Oh no. It was a precise 3-step system, all designed to guarantee the perfect shape and the perfect integrity of the sacred showbread from start to finish. Let me break this incredible process down for you. First, the raw dough gets pressed into a mold to get its basic shape. Second, it's actually baked inside another special mold right there in the oven to control its form as it cooks. And finally, and this is crucial, as soon as it comes out all hot and fragile, it's immediately placed into a third mold to cool down and set, which prevents it from collapsing or breaking. And of course, the Talmud anticipates our next question. Why do you need a third mold? I mean, that seems a little inefficient. Couldn't they just pop the hot loaf back into the first mold they used for the raw dough? The answer is it's beautifully simple. It's basic baking science. Once the dough is baked, it expands. It rises. The finished loaf is literally bigger than the raw dough, and it just doesn't fit into the first mold anymore. So yeah, they needed a separate, slightly larger mold just for the cooling process. So, wow, we've gone from deep textual analysis to ancient baking technology. Let's just pull back for a second and ask the big question. Why? Why all of this incredible detail about kneading and baking and molding bread? This isn't just about following rules. It's about a whole way of looking at the world and finding meaning in it. Ultimately, what this deep dive into the Talmud shows us is a worldview where nothing is an accident. It suggests that profound purpose and even divine communication can be found not just in some big, loud pronouncement, but by paying the closest possible attention to the tiniest details, even down to the spelling of a single word in a recipe for bread. And it kind of leaves us with a question, right? In our own lives, what meaning might we be missing just by not looking closely enough?